Jake rushed through the busy spaceport, his boots clicking against the polished floor as he weaved in and out of the crowds. He had just finished a long day of repairs on the starship's engine systems, and now all he wanted was to board his ship and get home. His mind was focused only on the task ahead. Get to the docking bay, grab his things, and settle into the long journey back to Earth. But just as Jake turned a corner near the main concourse, disaster struck. He didn't see her coming. The moment he collided with the tall figure, the cup of hot coffee in his hand flew through the air in a graceful arc, only to land directly on the person standing before him. The figure, a woman, gasped in shock. Her royal blue robes shimmered with intricate silver patterns, and the coffee splashed over her gown, soaking the fabric. The woman froze for a moment, then quickly pulled herself back together. Her sharp eyes, glowing a faint violet under the spaceport's bright lights, locked onto Jake. He froze too, realizing exactly what he had just done. His stomach dropped. I'm so sorry, Jake stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. I didn't mean to. Obviously, she cut him off, her voice cold and precise, like a blade slicing through the air. You should have been more careful. The woman's gaze never wavered from his. Her regal presence was impossible to ignore. Even in the busy terminal, people began to notice her. Some stared openly at the alien princess, whispering to each other. It was no secret that the Intergalactic Peace Summit had brought representatives from all over the galaxy to Earth, including royal figures like this one. And now she was standing in front of Jake, covered in his coffee. Let me help, Jake said, his hands shaking slightly as he reached out to assist her. I can get a towel or something. Touch me and you'll regret it, she snapped, backing away. But you will fix this. Jake blinked, taken aback by the anger in her voice. Her confidence was clear, and her authority was something that felt almost tangible. She was a princess, he realized. One of the dignitaries visiting Earth for the peace talks. Jake couldn't help but feel like a complete fool. Fix this? He asked, still confused. She folded her arms across her chest, her posture stiff and imperious. You are going to make sure my clothes are cleaned. Immediately. Jake's heart raced. The woman's voice left no room for argument, and for a brief moment he felt like a child being scolded by a parent. Still, he knew he couldn't just stand there, letting an alien princess walk away drenched in coffee. He had to do something. I can take you to my quarters, Jake offered. I've got cleaning supplies. I'll do whatever I can to help. She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Your quarters? You expect me to follow you to a human's quarters? Jake swallowed hard, regretting his words immediately. He wasn't even sure what he was thinking. The words had come out before he could stop them. Still, she hadn't rejected him outright. That was something. He quickly added, I'm just saying it's the closest place I know. I'll call a cleaner if you prefer. The alien princess studied him for a long moment. There was an intensity in her gaze, a calculating look that made Jake feel small. He had seen many species in his time working with the space program, but this alien woman was different. There was a power in her eyes, a wisdom that seemed far older than anything Jake had encountered. Fine, she said, after what felt like an eternity of silence. Take me to your quarters. I will give you one chance to redeem yourself. If you fail, I'll ensure you're punished. Jake could only nod. He didn't know if she was joking, but he wasn't about to find out the hard way. He quickly turned and motioned for her to follow. They walked through the busy corridors of the spaceport, Jake trying to keep his nerves in check. He had heard rumors about the Princess of Xylor, Lyrixa, a powerful alien race known for their advanced technology and their prideful, sometimes unforgiving rulers. The stories he had heard painted her as someone you didn't want to cross. And here he was, walking alongside her, a coffee-stained mess in the middle of an alien spaceport. As they passed through a security checkpoint, the guards gave Lyrixa a quick, respectful nod, but their eyes lingered on Jake. He couldn't help but feel out of place, like a small speck next to a towering star. They reached a small private room Jake had reserved for his personal use during his layover. It wasn't much, just a small bed, a desk, and a few basic amenities. But it was quiet, and it had the cleaning supplies he'd promised her. Lyrixa stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the room with the precision of someone who had never been impressed by anything less than perfection. Jake immediately began searching through the cabinets for a cleaning cloth. When he found one, he turned to her, expecting her to give him more orders. Instead, she stood still, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression unreadable. What are you waiting for? Right, yes, Jake muttered, forcing himself to focus. He walked over to her and gently took the gown she was wearing. The coffee had left a dark stain across the front, but the fabric still gleamed with its otherworldly elegance. Jake wasn't sure how to approach the situation without further angering the princess, so he decided to do what he could. "Don't be gentle with it," Lyrixa said, her voice suddenly less commanding but still full of authority. "I need to get back to my duties. The coffee stain must be gone by the time I return to my quarters." Jake hesitated before carefully scrubbing the fabric with the cloth. His hands moved quickly, his mind racing. He couldn't help but think about how different Lyrixa seemed compared to any other royal he had seen. Her race was known for their ruthless efficiency, and yet here she was, giving him instructions like he was an apprentice. The room was silent except for the sound of Jake working. He tried not to focus on how the princess stood near him, watching him with those glowing violet eyes. Finally, after a few tense moments, the stain began to fade, and the fabric looked a little cleaner. It wasn't perfect, but it was an improvement. Jake stepped back, sweat trickling down his forehead. "Is this acceptable, princess?" he asked, his voice nervous. Lyrixa looked down at the fabric, inspecting it with careful precision. After a long pause, she nodded once, sharply. "You did well," she said, and there was something in her tone that Jake couldn't place. Perhaps respect, or maybe just acknowledgement. "I thank you," Jake replied, unsure of what to make of her reaction. Her lips curled into the slightest of smiles, a smile that sent a chill down Jake's spine. "For a human," she said, her words heavy with meaning, "you're not entirely useless." Jake let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, but before he could say anything, Lyrixa turned to leave. "You will accompany me to the summit tomorrow," she said, her tone suddenly formal again. "The matter of this stain has been dealt with, but you still owe me something." Jake blinked. I don't understand." She didn't look back, but the edge of a smile lingered on her face. "You will. Be ready, Jake." Jake sat in his small quarters, nervously adjusting his shirt collar. He had no idea what was coming next, but when Lyrixa had left his room with those last words, the uncertainty had hit him hard. She said he owed her something, but what did she mean? Was this some kind of test? Or something else? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime at the door. He stood quickly, heart racing, and opened it to find Lyrixa standing there, her presence as commanding as ever. She was dressed in a new outfit, one more formal than the one she had worn earlier. Her robes shimmered under the room's artificial lights, an array of colors shifting like a nebula in the night sky. "I'm here for you, Jake," she said, her voice cool, as always. "You will accompany me to the summit, but first you have a task." Jake blinked, trying to make sense of her words. "A task? What do you need me to do?" "You will perform a ritual," she said, stepping into the room with the ease of someone who had walked this path 1,000 times. "A cleaning ritual from my world. It's an ancient tradition, one that you will participate in." Her violet eyes gleamed with a mixture of challenge and something else. Something Jake couldn't quite place. "Wait, what?" Jake asked, stunned. "A ritual?" "Yes," Lyrixa replied, her voice unwavering. "And you will do it right, or you will regret it. Understand?" Jake nodded, unsure what he had gotten himself into. A ritual? What kind of ritual was this, and why did it involve him? He had spent his life fixing engines, not participating in royal ceremonies or alien traditions. But if he was going to be involved, there was no backing down now. Lyrixa motioned for him to follow her. She led him through the winding corridors of the spaceport, passing through corridors filled with alien delegates from various planets. Many of them glanced at her with obvious respect, nodding as she passed, but when they saw Jake walking beside her, the looks quickly turned to whispers. The feeling of being out of place hit him again. He was a human among these powerful beings, none of whom seemed to take him seriously. Eventually, they arrived at a large, ornate room. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a circular chamber with an elevated platform in the center. The walls were decorated with intricate designs that seemed to shimmer and shift, as if the room itself was alive. "This is the cleansing chamber," Lyrixa explained. "It's where the ritual takes place." Jake hesitated for a moment. The space was nothing like anything he had ever seen before. It felt otherworldly. The air was thick with an energy he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't just a room, it was a place where something important happened. Lyrixa stood in the center of the room, her arms raised as if she were preparing for something. "The ritual begins with understanding," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "You must understand what is at stake here, Jake. This ritual represents the balance of power. It is not something to be taken lightly." Jake watched her closely, trying to catch every word. She was serious. There was no room for error. "Once you begin," she continued, "there is no turning back. Do you understand?" I understand, Jake replied, his voice more uncertain than he wanted it to be. The pressure was mounting. He wasn't sure what he was agreeing to, but he didn't want to back out now, not after everything. Larixa nodded, satisfied with his answer. Good, she said. Now, the first step is to prepare the cleansing water. She stepped to one side of the chamber, where a tall, translucent container stood. The liquid inside was a glowing, pale blue substance, swirling gently as if it had a life of its own. Jake took a step forward. What is that? It's the essence of purity from my homeworld, Larixa said. It must be used to cleanse both the body and the soul. Once you touch it, the ritual begins, and you will be linked to it until the task is complete. Jake couldn't help but feel nervous as he approached the container. The glowing liquid gave off an almost hypnotic light. He reached out hesitantly, dipping his fingers into the fluid. The moment his skin made contact, a jolt of energy ran through him, and he had to catch his breath. It was like nothing he had ever experienced before, intense and invigorating, yet calming at the same time. This is only the beginning, Lyrix's voice broke through his thoughts. Now you must cleanse me. Jake looked at her, confused. Cleansing you? What do you mean? The ritual requires that I be purified, she said, her voice softer but still commanding. You will use this water to remove the stain of imperfection. It is my request. My command. Jake hesitated. He had never done anything like this before. He was an engineer, not a ritual specialist. But the way she spoke left no room for negotiation. If he wanted to gain her respect and keep things from escalating further, he had no choice but to go along with it. I'll do my best, he said, his voice steadying as he tried to focus. He took a deep breath and began to pour the liquid onto the cloth that Larixa handed him. The fabric, similar to the one she had worn earlier, shimmered in the soft glow of the liquid as Jake carefully began to clean the stain that marred the royal garment. Do it with care, Larixa instructed, her eyes never leaving him. One wrong move, and the entire ritual will be ruined. You must concentrate, Jake. Jake's hands trembled slightly, but he focused all his energy on the task at hand. As he worked, he felt Larixa's gaze like a weight on his shoulders. It was as if she could see every movement he made, every small mistake, and that pressure only made him more determined to succeed. The cloth became cleaner with every pass of the glowing water. Slowly, the stain began to fade, the fabric returning to its original brilliant state. Jake worked tirelessly, careful not to let his nerves get the best of him. He didn't understand everything about the ritual, but he understood one thing. Failing here could have serious consequences. After several minutes of steady work, the fabric was pristine. Jake stepped back, his arms aching slightly from the effort. The room was silent except for the soft hum of energy in the air. Larixa stepped forward, examining the cloth closely. She raised an eyebrow. Impressive, she said, her voice devoid of the sharpness it had carried before. For a moment she seemed pleased. You did well, Jake, she continued, her tone shifting slightly. But this is only one part of the ritual. Jake's heart skipped a beat. What more could there possibly be? He had done everything she asked. He had followed her instructions to the letter. But Lyrix's eyes told him there was more to come. There's more? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady.
Lyrixa nodded, her expression becoming more serious once again.
The cleansing is not just of the body. It is of the spirit as well. And that means you must face what lies beneath the surface. Jake looked at her puzzled. Face what? Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment he saw something deeper in them, something almost human. Face the truth, Jake. You came here with nothing but your mistakes, and now you have a chance to prove your worth. To prove you can rise above it all. Jake's mind raced. He didn't know what she meant by that, but somehow the words resonated with him. In this moment, he realized that this ritual was more than just cleaning a garment. It was a test of character, of his willingness to step up when the stakes were high. It was a test of whether he could become someone worthy of standing alongside someone like Lyrixa. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. Now you must prove you understand what it means to serve. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle on him. He had no choice but to accept whatever came next. He had no idea what it would be, but he knew he had already crossed a point of no return. There was no turning back now. Jake was still trying to make sense of everything. The ritual, the glowing water, and Lyrix's command to prove his worth, it was all so overwhelming. He wasn't sure what the next step was or how far he was willing to go to gain her respect. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a simple task. It wasn't just about cleaning a garment. This was something bigger. something that would test more than just his physical ability. Lyrix's eyes were intense, and her presence filled the room as she motioned for Jake to stand tall. He straightened up, trying to look confident, though the anxiety inside him was growing. His palms were sweaty, his heart racing. Whatever came next, he had to be ready. "You've proven that you can follow orders," she said, her voice calm yet filled with authority. "But that is not enough. You must show me that you have strength of will, that you can endure, that you can prove yourself not only in actions but in the very core of your being." Jake's mind spun. What did that even mean? He had just cleaned a cloth and performed a ritual, something that felt more like an alien cultural exercise than a test of strength. Yet her words hung in the air, sharp and clear. It was obvious now. This was about more than just a mistake with coffee. It was about his entire character, his ability to survive in a world far beyond his own. Lyrixa stepped back, moving to the center of the room. There, she pressed a button on the wall, and suddenly the chamber began to hum with an unfamiliar energy. The floor beneath Jake's feet shifted, and before he could even react, a set of platforms emerged from the ground, rising up in front of him. The platforms were smooth and made of a strange metallic material that shimmered faintly under the chamber's light. As Jake looked at them, they seemed to pulse, almost like they were alive. Lyrix's voice broke through his thoughts once again. "Now we begin the trial," she said, her voice steady and emotionless. "This is a test of your strength, your mind, and your spirit. You will face challenges that will push you beyond your limits. But you must complete them to earn my respect." Jake felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't sure what she meant by challenges, but he knew there was no turning back now. He could only go forward. "I'm ready," Jake said, his voice stronger than he felt. He had to be. There was no room for doubt now. Lyrixa nodded, and with a single gesture, the first challenge began. The platform in front of Jake began to spin slowly, and as it did, the air around him thickened. The temperature began to rise, and soon the room was sweltering hot. Sweat ran down his forehead, and the heat pressed against his skin, making every breath feel heavier than the last. But it wasn't just the heat. As the platform turned faster, the air became thick with an energy that made Jake's head spin. His vision blurred, and his heart began to race faster. He stumbled for a moment, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. "Focus," Lyrixa commanded from the side of the room, her voice cutting through the haze. "You must stay centered. Do not let the distractions cloud your judgment." "Focus, Jake." Jake clenched his fists, trying to clear his mind. The heat, the spinning platform, the strange energy, all of it was overwhelming. He could feel his legs beginning to tremble, and for a moment he feared he might fall. But something in Lyrixa's words stuck with him. Focus. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breath. The heat was still there, but he pushed it to the back of his mind. The spinning platform still twisted beneath his feet, but he forced himself to find his balance. He focused on the center, on the point where the challenge began and where it would end. He had to fight through this. He had to prove he could. Gradually, the room began to settle. The heat lessened and the spinning slowed. Jake's heart rate returned to normal and his legs stopped shaking. He opened his eyes to find that the first challenge had passed. Lyrixa stood quietly, observing him. "You did well," she said, though her voice was not filled with praise. "But this was only the first test. Now, the real challenge begins." Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had barely managed the first challenge, and now she was telling him the real test was just starting? He didn't have time to dwell on it. Lyrixa had already moved to the next platform. It wasn't spinning anymore, but there was something about it that seemed even more intimidating than before. "You will face the next trial now," Lyrixa said, her voice carrying through the air with a sharpness that sent a chill down Jake's spine. "This challenge will test your mind. You will face a puzzle, one that requires more than just strength or endurance. It requires intelligence, problem-solving, and patience. You must solve it or fail." A puzzle? Jake's stomach tightened. He had never been great with puzzles. In fact, he was the kind of guy who preferred to fix things with his hands, not his mind. But he had no choice. He had to at least try. Lyrixa motioned to the platform, and suddenly the walls of the chamber began to shift. Panels slid open to reveal a massive, intricate grid in the center of the room. The grid was filled with hundreds of symbols, each one glowing faintly. There were lines and pathways crisscrossing the grid, connecting the symbols in ways Jake couldn't yet understand. "The puzzle will test your ability to find connections," Lyrixa explained. "You must find the right pattern, the path that leads to the solution. You will have only 15 minutes. Fail, and you will not pass this trial." Jake looked at the grid, his mind racing. The symbols made no sense to him. They weren't letters or numbers. They were abstract shapes that seemed to defy logic. He scanned the grid, trying to make sense of the connections, but the more he looked, the more complex it seemed. "This is impossible," Jake muttered under his breath. He had no idea where to start. His mind was spinning just like the platform from the first challenge. But he couldn't give up. Lyrixa was watching him, and there was no way he would let her see him fail. He took a deep breath and focused, trying to clear his mind. The symbols weren't just random. They were connected somehow. Maybe there was a pattern he wasn't seeing. He took a step closer to the grid and began tracing the paths with his finger, looking for connections between the symbols. As he traced the lines, a realization hit him. It wasn't just about solving the puzzle. It was about understanding the logic behind it. Each symbol was a part of a larger system, and once he started thinking in terms of connections, the solution became clearer. He moved quickly, solving one part of the puzzle after another. With every correct move, the grid lit up a little more, confirming that he was on the right track. But time was running out. He had only a few minutes left, and the pressure was building again. Finally, with less than a minute to spare, Jake connected the final symbols. The grid flashed brightly and a soft chime sounded, signaling that he had completed the puzzle. Lyrixa nodded approvingly. "You have passed the second trial," she said, her voice softer than before. "You showed patience and intelligence. Now the final challenge awaits." Jake stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He had made it this far, but the hardest challenge was yet to come. Lyrixa hadn't said what the final test would be, but he knew it would push him beyond everything he had faced so far. His body was sore from the first trial, his mind exhausted from the puzzle, but he wasn't going to back down, not now. Lyrixa turned and walked to the edge of the chamber. "This final trial will test your spirit," she said, her voice low and serious. "It will ask you to confront your deepest fears. Only those who are truly strong of will can pass it." Jake swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what this final challenge would be, but he was ready to face it, whatever it took. Jake stood on the edge of the platform, sweat dripping down his brow as he tried to steady his breath. The third challenge had been more than he could have imagined. The room had shifted, and suddenly he was faced with his own worst fears. Memories from his past, moments of doubt and failure flashed before his eyes. He had been forced to confront the part of himself he tried to hide, the moments when he wasn't sure he had what it took to be a leader, to make a difference in the universe. But somehow, through it all, he had endured. He had stood firm in the face of his own insecurities and come out stronger. It wasn't easy, but that was the point of Lyrix's tests. She had pushed him to his limits, and now he was standing on the brink of something he never imagined. An alliance with an alien princess and the fate of an entire world on his shoulders. Lyrix's presence filled the room, calm and unyielding as always. She had watched every challenge from the sidelines, her eyes constantly evaluating him, studying his every move. But now, with the final trial complete, the atmosphere had shifted. The tension had faded, replaced by something far more serious. "You've proven yourself, Jake," Lyrixa said, her voice steady, yet there was an unmistakable note of approval. "I have seen what you are capable of. Your strength, your mind, and your spirit. All of it. But now, you must face the most important challenge of all." Jake's heart skipped a beat. What more could there be? He had passed her tests, faced his fears, and somehow survived it all. Surely this was the moment when things would settle down. Lyrixa stepped forward, her eyes locking onto his. "The final trial was never about me testing you. It was about proving to yourself that you have the strength to face what lies ahead, that you are capable of standing alongside me, not as a servant, but as an equal." Jake blinked in surprise. Equal? Was that what this had been about all along? He had never thought of himself as someone who could stand next to someone like Lyrixa, let alone someone so powerful and regal. But she was right. In these tests, he had pushed himself farther than he ever thought possible, and now he wasn't just the human who spilled coffee on an alien princess. He was someone who had earned her respect. Lyrixa continued, her voice softening just slightly. "There is something I must share with you, Jake. Something important. My people are in danger. Our world is under threat by an outside force, an enemy that seeks to destroy everything we hold dear. The only hope we have is to form an alliance with your people. The strength of humanity is the key to our survival." Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had suspected that there was more to Lyrixa's visit to Earth than just diplomatic talks. He had no idea how serious the situation was, but now that he understood, it felt like the weight of the universe had just landed squarely on his shoulders. "You are the one I chose to stand with me," Lyrixa said, her voice unwavering. "You've passed my trials, but there is still much for you to understand. This alliance, it's not just about military power. It's about something deeper. It's about trust, about recognizing that humanity, with all its flaws, can offer something that no other species can." Jake felt a surge of emotion in his chest. Trust? He had always thought of Earth as small, insignificant, a planet struggling to catch up with the rest of the galaxy. But now, standing in this room with Lyrixa, he realized that maybe humanity had something to offer after all. "Why me?" Jake asked, his voice quieter now, filled with curiosity and uncertainty. "Why choose me to lead this alliance?" Lyrixa's eyes softened just slightly, though her expression remained as intense as ever. "Because, Jake, you see the world with fresh eyes. You understand the value of determination, of working together to overcome obstacles. You are a symbol of humanity's potential. And most importantly, you have the courage to stand up when it matters." Jake didn't know what to say. He had always felt like just another cog in the machine, never thinking he could be the one to make a difference. But now, in the presence of Lyrixa and the weight of everything that was happening, he understood. He had been tested, and now it was his time to lead. Lyrixa stepped closer, her gaze piercing into his soul. "The enemy we face is formidable. They are known as the Vorn, a species from the far reaches of the galaxy. They are ruthless, cold, and have no regard for the lives of others. They seek to consume everything in their path, and they have already begun their campaign against us." Jake nodded, his mind racing. The Vorn sounded like something straight out of a nightmare. He had heard stories about ruthless conquerors before, but the idea of an enemy so powerful that they could wipe out entire species was terrifying. "But we can't fight this war alone," Lyrixa continued. "We need humanity's help. Your ability to adapt, to innovate, is something the Vorn cannot understand. That is why we must forge this alliance. Together we can defeat them." Jake took a deep breath, the enormity of what she was asking weighing heavily on him. He had never thought of himself as a hero, but now it seemed like the fate of not just Earth, but the galaxy, depended on his next steps. "How do we begin?" he asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Lyrixa smiled, a rare and almost imperceptible gesture. "First, you must return to Earth and unite your people. I will join you when the time comes, but the foundation of this alliance must be built by you. You have the power to rally others, to bring them together. Only then can we stand against the Vorn." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settling in his chest. He had always believed in the strength of humanity, in their ability to overcome anything, but this was something more. This was their moment to prove that they belonged in the galaxy, not as weaklings or bystanders, but as powerful allies. "I won't let you down," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I know you won't," Lyrixa replied. "That is why you are the one I chose." She turned away, her posture regal and proud, yet there was something in her expression that hinted at something more. Perhaps it was a flicker of trust, or maybe a growing respect for the human who had proven himself worthy. Jake couldn't help but wonder what the future held. But one thing was certain, the galaxy was about to change, and humanity would have a role to play in it, standing side by side with Larissa and the people of Xylor. As Larissa left the room, Jake stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything sinking in. He had faced trials that tested his body, mind, and spirit. And now, he was about to face the greatest challenge of all, uniting humanity to fight an enemy that threatened the entire galaxy. But he wasn't afraid. He had Larixa's trust, and more importantly, he had his own belief in humanity. It was time to show the universe what Earth was made of. Jake turned and walked toward the door, his mind already focused on the future. The alliance had begun, and there was no turning back now.